Have you ever wondered why it is we code switch? A recent article on Harvard Business Review stated broadly, code switching involves adjusting one's style of speech, appearance, behavior, and expression in ways that will optimize the comfort of others in exchange for fair treatment, quality service, and employment opportunities. You might also be wondering what this has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. That excerpt illustrates the importance of assessing our values and how code switching can or cannot have its repercussions. My name is Rochelle Carrier, and I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And for a living, I help thought provoking leaders implement DEI business plans in their workplace. And if you tune in, not only will you have a better insight of our experiences, it will allow room for self reflection. Joining us today is my guest, Captain Roy Love, who is now retired. He was born in the Dominican Republic and moved to the US in 1983. In 1993, he graduated from the State University of New York Maritime College with a BS in marine transportation. He attended the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island, earning a Master Arts degree in National Security and Strategic Studies in 2008. He deployed to Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2009 in support of the Army 304th Sustainment Brigade, managing and distributing fuel across all of Iraq to support US and allied forces. Now retired since July of 2021, he is the president of the Association of Naval Officers, ANSO, which conducts recruitment and outreach within America's underserved communities, which directly supports Hispanic, Latino, and Latina members in their decision to remain their respective services and provides mentoring and professional development. Roy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rochelle. It's an honor. Thank you.
It is, and you have been one of my most faithful and loyal listeners and commentators. Thank you so much for all the feedback that you provide to us. That's how you keep us alive.
I love your show. Thank you for doing it.
It's some of these topics are very triggering, and it also brings, I believe, a level of awareness in order for us to be able to come to terms to what it is that we're doing so that we can be in the moment and understand why it is we do certain things, as we navigate race and gender in the workplace and also outside of the workplace. So when
Absolutely.
it comes to code switching, I wanted to ask you, have you ever code switched?
Yeah, I was born code switching. Yeah. So no, I grew up in the Dominican Republic, and it's Latinos, Hispanos, hablamos español, we speak Spanish, and in DR, depending on your economic, level, you get to go to different schools. I was fortunate that in kindergarten, I went to Abraham Lincoln School, and it was all English and American teachers. So I learned English as I was learning Spanish side by side in a Hispanic in a Spanish country, right? A Spanish speaking country. And so coming up, I'd go to school and I'd speak English there in your standard English, right? Because we all understand the African American vernacular English versus standard English and the multiple different ways that people speak across the US. So growing up in the Caribbean, in school, always English, at home, always Spanish. So code switching is not just, the way we speak one language or multiple ways of speaking one language, but also switching from one language to another. And so I grew up doing that. Fast forward to moving to Puerto Rico, and I've never been to a school where I had to speak Spanish in school, and I get thrown in with all the Puerto Rican kids. Now I'm speaking Dominican Spanish, right? And I have to learn Puerto Rican Spanish.
Right.
When I've been to school speaking only English. And so I had to learn how to speak the way they spoke, and say words the way they used them. And then with the Puerto Ricans, with the R, it's a little bit different than growing up in the Dominican Republic. And then, fast forward a couple of years, end up in New York City, in the Bronx, and now I'm speaking New York City English, right? I come to school with my standard English, and people are looking at me like, "Who's this guy think he is, and where did he learn English?" So now I have to learn the Bronx vernacular, and how to speak that, and not just Black English in the Bronx, but Spanish English in the Bronx, right? Latino
Right.
English, Puerto Rican. And so, yes, absolutely had to use that. And of course, as we grow and start working in different businesses, that code switching becomes kind of essential as you communicate up the chain at
Right.
work and with other personnel.
Did you know you were code switching at that time?
I no, I knew I was changing the way I spoke in order to fit in better, depending on the community that I was talking with. But the term code switching, I heard, I think 4 or 5 years ago at most. I started really kind of becoming aware of what it meant and what it did and what it was about.
Right. And are there any other instances that you found yourself code switching when you realized that this is what you are doing, or there was an actual term to the behavior? Did you become more aware to code switch or to not code switch?
I think I did. I have a tendency to, when I'm with a group of Latinos or Black friends, to try to mimic or say and speak the way that they do. And in instances where we're in a professional environment, you normally, I mean, like I said, I learned the standard English, right? And so I would see myself changing the way I addressed a friend uh, or colleague based on whether they were Latino, Black, or white, and also how you express yourself in meetings and things like that. And you have to really be aware. And depending on the group that you're with, some things are more acceptable than others. So yeah, I think knowing what it meant and having heard, hey, this is code switching, you become a little bit more aware of when you do it. Like, oh, I just changed that. My wife certainly notices because she says when I'm with a specific group, it's like, why are you talking like that? I was like, I'm from New York. I can talk this way. I'm allowed to, you know.
Ah. And do you find that there are advantages? Like, what are the advantages you believe and disadvantages of code switching?
I think fitting in, right? We all have this need for belonging. And so in an environment where, you may be threatened because you speak either a certain way, you're going to try to be like everyone else, to be more accepted, or to be brought into the fold. Like, hey, he's one of us. I think in a professional environment, you want to make sure that you're using that standard English, so that people don't think less of you. I think we all fear that. If I use a certain word, I use the wrong word, what are people going to think of me? And do they think that I belong here or not? Um,
Right. And did you think that it was essential to evaluate, your workplace goals? When you think of your workplace goals, you were in the Navy for a long time.
yeah.
And did you evaluate your workplace goals to understand if that's something you had to do there as well?
I think so, but mostly not in English, but the English versus Spanish, right? There's a lot of Latinos. There's over 67,000 Latinos in the US Navy. That's a good number, right? It's about 18 to 19% of the force. Coming when I first came into the Navy and I went to boot camp in San Diego, this was 1988. No one spoke Spanish. Everybody was afraid to speak Spanish to each other. That's changed. And in my first couple of years, I was afraid to speak Spanish to other Latinos in the Navy, right? Um,
Why
and
is that?
so because you would always be told, this is the Navy, we speak English. You're in America, speak English. And you'd hear this all the time. I came to realize several years later that if I wanted to be who I was, I needed to say some words in Spanish. Like you'll have somebody come up to you and say, mi casa, su casa. And we laugh about it. And I would correct and say, no, mi casa es su casa. If you're going to speak Spanish, speak it correctly, because you want me to speak English correctly, and we let you get away with butchering, our words, as opposed to, in our words, I mean the Spanish words, and you don't, you laugh at and make fun of Latinos who mispronounce English words, and so that
Right.
person feels diminished, and we push them away. Other things that I've done in my career are, I was commander of Naval Base San Diego, second largest naval base in the world, and I got a command equal opportunity survey, and someone complained that there were people speaking other languages on the base and that it was okay. And they were specifically referring to, at that time, people from the Philippines, Tagalog, because they would gather in, different places with folks like them to speak Tagalog. And I actually got up in front of my crew and I said, I'll be damned if people can't speak their languages here and connect with each other because someone objects to that. And I understand that English is the approved language for how we communicate and do business. But when
Correct.
people are together, right, no one has a right to tell you you must speak a specific language, right? That takes away from their unity, from their sense of belonging, from their sense of acceptance.
And
Uh,
identity.
and identity, absolutely. And all you do is discourage those folks. They're not going to want to work there. They're not going to want to be a part of that team. And your team will never succeed if you're so divisive that you're telling people that they have to speak a certain way and only a certain language when you have all of this diversity that can be advantageous. And yet, when you need to have people go to a foreign country and conduct business for the military or the government, you're looking for that one person that can speak that language because it will benefit us.
Right.
But
Do
we
you
don't
think,
cultivate it.
right. Do you think that you were an advocate also on behalf of those that came from different cultural backgrounds or
Oh,
different ethnicities?
absolutely. Absolutely. I've been advocating, for Latinos and Hispanics pretty much most of my career. After that first or second year in the Navy, where I realized the 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 pushback against, Latinos, and that it was hard at that time, right? It was hard. And so I started to just say things in Spanish. I was a young lieutenant junior grade. So like my second year, I would pronounce Spanish names in Spanish on the bridge of the ship, right? And then the captain started to notice. And anytime we had to communicate, we were in South America, Central America, they called me up to the bridge to speak on the radio, and that gave me more, and je parle français aussi, so, and like you. So speaking French, going down to Haiti in 1993, when the big Haitian migration happened, and immediately after that, Cuba, I was on the bridge on the radio contacting ships and boats in Spanish and French. I
Right.
don't speak patois, but,
Creole.
Creole or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's interesting. When you initially started the conversation, there were certain things that you said that made me think that it sounded very divisive because some languages, don't speak that language, or we hear people speaking,
Mhm,
that language or another language, and this is an English speaking. We're in English
mhm.
speaking America. That's divisive.
It is. It is. Let me. Here's an example. I went to a Merchant Marine Academy, New York Maritime, and we had a lot of foreign students sent there by their government, sent here to the United States to learn. Some of them were from Panama, and they would come because they were going to go work in the Panama Canal. And so I became very good friends with most of the Panamanian students in my school. We went to New Orleans with the school ship one day, and we're sitting at this restaurant and listening to something, and my buddy, Panamanian, is speaking to me in Spanish, and I'm responding, and a young man in front of us turns around and goes, "Speak English, this is America." And I said, and I was pissed. I was
Oh,
like, okay. I said, first of all, this, young man right here is from Panama, right?
right.
And he lives in America because he lives in South America, Central America, and North America, right? English is the language of the United States, and as far as I know, it's still not officially been stated that this is the only language. And so, I was upset. My buddy was like, "Calm down, calm down." I was like, "No." And then the guy turns around. After he turns around, he's like, "Oh, you're from Panama? Oh, I visited it." And then he was all friendly and stuff. But why even initiate that, right? Why even
Right.
start? with
Right.
speak English. This is America. A lot of
Right.
assumptions are made, you know.
Right. I think it's important. I just did a webinar right before we jumped on this podcast, and they were clearly stating, there was several panelists, and they said we have to call people out on it exactly when it happens,
Yes.
because there was a comment. This might be off track a little bit, but someone had told her, and they looked at her. It was an employer who looked at her and said, and this again, I'm taking this out of context, but they said, "I don't see color." And
I
then,
love that.
right? So she came back and said, "Well, if you don't see color, then you don't see me." And then they backed off.
Mhm.
And they said, "When you say that, that means you don't recognize me as a Black person. Because when I look at you, I see a white person."
Absolutely.
And then that's when the conversation began, because at the same time, "I don't see color" might mean that I'm not racist, I want to be your friend. It can mean a whole bunch of things. But at
Mhm.
the same time, it's important, like what you did, to be able to call it out when it happens, so that no matter who you are and where you go, you will be accepted.
Absolutely. And usually when people make those statements, they're just, sometimes they're just being dumb. They're just being silly. They think it's a joke. It's going to be funny. And if you laugh and just say, "Oh, I'm sorry," what do they do, after that? They're going to
Right,
continue to do the same thing without
right,
truly understanding. We have a lot of, young men and women that go to school in the United States and take a language, learn French, learn Spanish, and they go out and they practice it with their buddies and friends. Uh, but if someone comes from another country to work in this country, is here legally, and is doing everything possible, why can't we be accepting of that and
right.
understand they're also learning a second language?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because I think, again, those are the repercussions,
Mhm.
right? I believe those repercussions affect us, and it also affects the narrative for the other person. They're perpetuating
Mhm.
the racism and the racial inequalities and the language and the divisiveness, because they haven't been stopped to say, well, this is what it actually makes me feel,
Yes.
and this is what it's doing to me, and this is the reality of what you just said, right? I think those repercussions are, if we don't address them, they're pretty damaging.
Or you know what it does to people? Like, you want to speak English, you try. The minute someone puts you down because of the way that you pronounced a word or said something, will push you back, and you will regress and not want to learn or put forth the effort, right, to become better, to
Right,
understand it better, to speak it better. That happens to a lot of Latino people.
right,
It, and even when we're talking about just the standard English, right, versus the way that we speak and we grow up. I've had teachers from Boston, Massachusetts, whose English isn't 100% standard, and
right,
yet they don't get corrected. But if you, right, say something that doesn't sound right as a person of color, people look at you like, "Oh, well, you don't know how to speak it well."
right.
I had somebody actually come up to me one time and say, "Oh, you speak English so well," and I said, "Yes, thank you. I'm educated, and I've been speaking English since I was in kindergarten. But thank you, appreciate it."
Right.
Because the implied thing
Yes.
was, "I'm surprised that you speak English. I'm
Yes.
surprised you speak English too."
Right.
Right? What the hell?
Right. And
And
that's a
then
microaggression.
that is like, is that a compliment, honestly, that you think I speak so well, or it's just weird that you find that I speak so well? And
Right.
what do you think about me on that? And the greatest compliment I ever got was in college by my English teacher. He said, "You're the best English student I've ever had," right? And she
Hmm.
meant it. She gave me
Hmm.
an A, so it was good. But that's a
Right.
proper way of saying something about someone, and their ability to speak language.
Right.
Um,
Do you think it increases the likelihood of being hired in the workplace? Do you think that it increased your likelihood of being hired in I'm sure, I mean, you were in the Navy since you were very young,
Mhm.
but do you think it increased your likelihood of being hired or even being accepted by your
Oh,
peers?
of course, absolutely, 100%. The way we speak, the way we communicate is judged, right? And if you sound like you came from one of the neighborhoods in the Bronx, if I say, "Yo, what up?" To my boss or somebody at work, right? They're gonna immediately go, instead of "Good morning, how are you?" Right? You get judged. It doesn't matter. So we change. We change the way we speak with different people in order to gain that acceptance, right? And that trust. Also, I think people are going to trust more that they think you're better educated, regardless of whether you are or not, right?
Right,
That you're better educated and you have a better ability to speak and communicate because you use standard English.
right,
And so, even in the Navy, and one of the big things is, I owe a lot of my success to my education and my background.
right.
Without it, right, and without the ability to speak clearly and write well, you you lose a lot of opportunities because people
Mm,
are reading what you write, they're listening to what you say, how you say things, and whether or
correct,
not you can clearly communicate and get a point across.
correct. Pablo, thank you, Pabel, not Pablo, Pabel Martinez, thank you for joining. He said, thank you for being open about this conversation. He said, this is a fascinating perspective on language. He said, it feels like second nature. We didn't even notice it when he was code
That's
switching.
true.
He said, it
That's,
feels like something that we just did or had to do.
oh, it is, and it is. I mean,
Right.
I
And
don't
Lisa,
know. I don't know. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, so I don't know how most people answer the phone, right? But it depends on who the person is on the phone. And my 5-year-old gave me a perfect example the other day of the things that I do, and I just laughed and I said, "Where'd you hear that?" But and when my brother calls, it was my brother. She hands me the phone and she says, "Oh, it's your brother," and then she goes, "What's up, yo?"
Ah,
I was like,
you
"Yeah."
see?
I was like, "Yeah, what's up, yo?"
But she knew who to do it with.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Exactly.
So she's modeling.
Oh my God, yeah. And code switching at 5. Yes, indeed.
Do you think it's critical for you to be your authentic self regardless of your work environment?
I think we try. I think you can't be your authentic self. What is that? And who is that person? And I try to be as much as possible. There are times when I'm going to answer the phone and I think it's a business call. I'm gonna go with the expected response. Hello,
Right.
good morning. How are you? Right. If it's my brother, I'm being myself. Either way, I'm being myself. Right. Because if it's my brother and we can be stupid with each other. um, and so you feel more comfortable, right? But there's this sense of, oh, I feel good. I'm about to answer this phone call, so I can be me, or I'm not sure what this phone call is about. Let me put on this other face, right? And so yeah, I think we all make those decisions consciously,
Right.
because of whatever perceived benefit or less drama if I answer this correctly.
Right. Lisa Hurley, who's a great contributor as well, she tunes in quite often. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining. She says that you speak so well and you speak such good English statement is one of the most egregious microaggressions around. The presumption of superiority on the part of the person who says that is truly mind boggling.
Mhm. Yeah, I think a lot of times though people don't even realize what they're doing,
Mm,
right? They want to pay you a compliment, but that bias that's internalized that comes
right,
from years and years, it just
right,
comes forward. And so some of us will take it differently than others.
right. It's interesting. I think, I've had several guests talk about code switching on the podcast. And I think it's a toggle between they will continue to code switch to be accepted, or it causes so much mental exhaustion at the end of the day that they rather be their authentic self. But being your authentic self, given the fact, we're in this pandemic, or now it's an endemic. I think in a Lean In article, it stated that I think 45 or 50% of women and men of color enjoy being at home and working from home, so they don't have to deal with the code switching, the microaggressions, the tokenism, the imposter syndrome. And it's more of a safe space for them. How does that make you feel? I mean, you have children. Do you think that this is something that's going to be here for a while, for people to be able to work from home, to feel safe?
Wow, that's a great question. This pandemic or endemic doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. I think it's important for everybody to understand that we all come from different places and have different backgrounds. And so,
Right.
an expectation that someone's going to speak like you and sound like you is a bad expectation.
Right.
And we should be able to communicate freely without having to think about what the next word I'm going to say is, because that does cause stress, right? Am I going to use the appropriate word? Did I use this? Sometimes I'll say something and I go back and think, man, I could have said that a different way. Um, the more natural you are, the better communicator you will be. And so when we ask people to not be natural as they speak to us, right, we force that because of an expectation or a judgment, because we've seen them judge others. We're creating a space that isn't safe for communication, where people are going to tell you things that you might want to hear the way you want to hear them, as opposed to the truth.
Right.
Um, I don't know how the pandemic truly affects those of us being at home, and if we still have to communicate. I mean, it's easier to write something and send it via text and via email without having to communicate. You don't hear my accent. You don't hear me speak a certain way because I'm writing in English. I'm writing you a letter, and I've got Grammarly, and it's going to correct all my silliness. And then I send it to you. And then when you call me on the phone, I sound different. And you're like, is this the same person that's been writing to me? And so that person feels kind of like, they feel bad about that, and it feels inauthentic, right? Um, so I do think a lot of us do want to be as authentic as possible in the way that we speak and communicate and express ourselves the way we're used to expressing ourselves with our families, with our best friends, right?
Right.
Being different at work does cause some mental stress, I think.
Right. Pabel again says the only way that we will redefine what professionalism means is for all of us to be our most authentic self. We code switch in some ways because we see others do it, and we don't have enough representation of us not faking it and being successful.
True, true, true. Yes.
Right? I think that's what happens. You're code switching, like you were saying, to be able to be accepted, integrated, respected. But if there was somebody else, let's say Roy, who looked like you and who was from your background, do you think you'd code switch less?
Um, if there were more of us, probably we would use whatever vernacular we're all used to, and there'd be somebody in there though that would probably have to think they had to code switch, right? It's always going to be that. If the entire group is homogeneous and we all grew up in the Bronx in the same neighborhood, 170th Street or whatever, we all know each other. So I went to high school in Queens, and I went to a mostly white high school in Queens. And I come back to the Bronx, and the way we spoke was different. There was a lot less cussing in Queens in school than there was in my neighborhood.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So yes, absolutely. But could we ever get there? Is there ever going to be kind of a balance? I think the way that English is been changing and shifting does point to a more inclusive, right, use of the language. I have a lot of white friends who speak like they're from the Bronx, right?
Right. Do you think being authentic, Pabel says this is interesting. He said being authentic gives people around us permission to be themselves.
I think so in many, many ways, right? If we all speak the way we want to speak and communicate and everyone's accepted, absolutely. Um, my wife is one of those people who speaks primarily Spanish. So when she engages someone in English, she will often say things in Spanish. And I go like, they don't understand you. She's like, well, they better learn.
Ah,
That's a brave woman. I was like, okay. Then I translate what she said was. And so
that's
that
interesting.
takes a lot of courage, right?
She's not willing to code switch.
He is not willing to code switch, even in
She's
Spanish.
she's
Absolutely.
yeah. And that's how for her, that's how she's going to get the respect. And if
Absolutely.
you don't like it, then you can speak to somebody else.
Exactly.
Jeff Marquez, he said, authentic where our who? Oh, where our who, what, and our why intersect. Where we are our most comfortable, natural, and organic self.
That's good. That's a great definition. I think so. Um, you know, we are who we are. And
Right,
sometimes we compromise, the way we act, the way we speak, for
right,
others. And in
right,
that, we diminish ourselves. And so you have to really be self aware and understand, what it is you want to be and what you want to be about. Um,
right,
and I think sometimes we think that in a specific setting, we can't be that kind of person.
right. It's it's challenging. I think at the same time, what's important is that we change the narrative.
Yes.
We change our own narrative so that we understand that we deserve a place everywhere we go.
Yes.
And we're going to bring our chairs everywhere we go to have a seat at that table or at the boardroom table, and to be able to accept us the way we are,
Yes. Yes.
right?
It goes back to not feeling like an imposter.
Right.
I'm one of those people that have never felt like an imposter. I belong. Doesn't matter what room I'm in. And if I'm the only one, it doesn't matter. Right. What I'm looking for is others. Why aren't there others in here? That's the question. And what are we doing to bring others in there, to help others feel authentic, to help others really not feel like they have to change the way they are, code switch in an environment because they feel secure and safe.
I'm happy you said that because next month, which is soon in February, we're focusing, the whole theme of the month is how human resource recruiters and resource departments can partner with DEI consultants or advocates to bring in more people of color and diverse backgrounds so that they are represented, so that they do have diverse outcomes. There are more benefits. You have different ways of thinking and processing information that can lead to different solutions,
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So it's quite interesting how when you said, it's when there's more of us, and I think more of us means more representation. We
Absolutely.
definitely need more representation for my daughter, for, your kids,
Mhm.
so that they don't have to code switch. Because I personally found it to be mentally exhausting. My parents are Haitian, I'm Haitian. And I remember clearly being in situations where I would call my friend and just speak in Creole
Yeah.
and feeling relieved and
Right.
comfortable,
Yes.
right? And
Because
and
that you
saying,
can let out that emotion in
right,
your own language.
in my
Right.
own
And
language,
it
right.
feels better.
Mm. And I think it's important, we have to give ourselves some grace. We must keep having these courageous and authentic conversations about DEI. We don't know where these dialogues will take us, but at least we're here to help and share. So give yourself some grace Let's keep pushing the DEI needle forward. Roy, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you all for listening to Diversity Connects Us.
Well, thank you, Rochelle. You have a blessed day.
You too.